That'll work better. Good. Daniel, would you hit the lights for me, please? Excellent. We're going to begin with Amendment 1, just because that seems logical. So we begin here with Amendment number 1. It's the freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. So I was thinking last night just a little bit and trying to figure out how could we remember those personal freedoms a little bit better. And I thought of this right before I fell asleep last night. And I know it's a sad thing, but I often am thinking about what I'm teaching the next day before I go to bed. And that's just the sad reality of my life. But I'm thinking, all right, there has to be an acronym, there has to be something. And so the best thing I could come up with, and if any of you come up with something better, let me know. If we rearrange those and we go religion, assembly, speech, press, petition, then it would be RASP. There's two P's on the end. RASP, like the beginning of raspberry. And there is a P in raspberry in case you are not familiar with that. So if that will help you remember what are the 5 parts of the First Amendment freedoms, remember RASP with an extra P. That may help kick your brain into motion to help you remember. And you do need to know those 5 First Amendment rights. They are really, really important, not just to my government test, but also for life, is that you need to be familiar with what those are all about. And so we're going to dive into those a little bit more into Chapter 19 when we get into our next unit. I'm not going to fully develop all of them right now. I just am concerned that you know here are the 5 First Amendment freedoms and that you know Amendment number 1. Now let's talk Amendment number 2. Amendment number 2 is, as we've talked about already, the right to bear arms. One of my all-time favorite cartoon characters is Yosemite Sam. And I would just love to bring him into the Supreme Court conversation when it comes to the Second Amendment. So every time I used to wake up on Saturday mornings and watch the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show, and Yosemite Sam and Bugs Bunny were going at it, I knew it was a good day. So here we have the right to bear arms. Now, there's a lot of controversy over this one. And while it seems very upfront and straightforward, there is some debate as to whether this was intended for personal use or intended for militia use. And those that are wanting to take guns out of the hands of individuals will make the latter argument and say that the intention of this amendment was only for militia use, and so therefore we can take it out of the hands of the individual private citizens. And as long as we still have a militia or an army that has the right to own weapons, then we're fine. Personally, I don't agree with that, but there is a big argument there. Number 3. So no quartering of troops. So why did we put this one in there? Those of you that took U.S. history last year, what do you know about the history behind this one? Tasha? Yeah. So, yeah, they weren't allowed to say no. I'm going to close this blind here so that I can see a little better. So why did the British do that? Were they just trying to be mean and force the colonists into putting strangers into their home? Let's play the British card today. Let's look at it from the other side of the pond, and let's find out, why did the British do what they did? Even if you haven't taken U.S. history, let's just think about this for a moment. The British have colonies here in the New World, all the way across the ocean. We take our map here. They send troops over. Why were the troops there in the first place? Why are the troops there? Maybe I need to come over here and talk on this side, so that way I can find out from somebody over in this section. Better just hope that I don't jump on you. Why are troops in the New World? They're watching the colonists. What are they doing there? Okay, maybe they want to spy on them a little bit and see what they're doing, figure out their fighting style. So there's the anticipation of maybe we're going to go to war. Yeah, why else might they have been there? They want to keep control over them. Okay, that's another part of this. There's a more direct reason. Right now we're looking at it from the colonist perspective. Look at it from the British perspective. Why did they put troops in the New World? What does Britain have to gain from the colonies by having these colonies in the New World? Money. And what was the fear back in the 1750s when the British colonies were, they're still British at that point, when the British colonies were not able to defend themselves? What was the great fear? Who were they being attacked by?
They feared that they would lose their investment if they got taken over.
And so the fear of losing that investment by being taken over by one of two groups of people, is either the French or the Indians, forced the king and parliament to say, send troops over there for their protection. So you're a British citizen and you see your army come in to protect you from this enemy. Is that a good thing? Yeah, it's a good thing. Because you want to be protected from Indians, from the French. And so initially they were welcomed in, and it would be like if we were at war and you saw the American soldiers come in, you'd say, oh, thank goodness they're here to protect us. Awesome. Well, fast forward 20 years. The British soldiers are still there for the protection of the colonists. Now what is the opinion of the colonists? 20 years later. What do you think? You're a colonist. You've had soldiers living amongst you, not in your homes yet, but living amongst you for your own protection. It's been almost 20 years since the French and Indian War ended. What do you think, Nathan?
Do we even need them?
Yeah, why do we need these guys? Why do they have to be here? We can defend ourselves. We're stronger, we're bigger, we can be independent. Well, I shouldn't use the word independent. We're talking this part of history. But we can defend ourselves. Well, back in England, they were also having problems at home with money, and so they decided, let's stop paying for these soldiers to be over there. And the colonists, they're not pulling their weight. They're not paying enough. So instead of taxing the colonists more money, let's just ask them to do us a favor by putting these soldiers in their homes. Everybody saves money. Everybody wins. You guys ever thought about it from that perspective? U.S. history people, did you guys talk about that at all last year? I see a lot of blank stares. Should we go knock on Mr. John's door and have him come back? Okay. Did you guys talk about it from the British angle, though?
No.
Probably not, because you were studying U.S. history. So think about it from the British side. They were thinking, hey, let's save everybody money. Let's just ask these colonists, do us a favor here. Put these people up in your homes. That way I don't have to tax you any more than what I already am. And everybody's happy. Colonists, are you happy? No. You're not seeing it.
You're still tired of it.
You're still tired of them being there, yes. And now you have to invite these soldiers into your home, and you are forced under the law to do so. Okay. So we took a long winding route to get here. But it's important that we understand that context to why we have this in here. And this was, to me, one of the great misunderstandings between the colonists and the British Parliament, was the idea of quartering of troops. If you study British history, they have a way different perspective on their treatment of the colonists. And if you have an opportunity to take a history of England class in college, do it. It's awesome. Just do it for me. You can say, hey, Mr. Jones made me do this. And it will be worthwhile. It is a really great history to understand. So no quartering of troops. So they cannot force us against our will to house our soldiers. So a few of these, I'm going to try to give you some mind tricks, some things that help me remember what number these go along with. If they work for you, great. If they don't work for you, don't come and point at me and say, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Why did you tell us that? It does not work. I'm sorry it doesn't work for you, but it works for me. So, quartering of troops. This is, a quarter is worth, or how many quarters do you have in a dollar? You have 4 quarters in a dollar. This is not Amendment 4. A quarter is worth, or we have 3 quarters here to remember quartering of troops. not equal 4. It's all messed up in my mind. But 3 quarters in a dollar, it doesn't really work. So don't put quartering of troops as number 4 because that doesn't work. Okay? So, see, I'm telling you, you don't want to get up here in my head too much, but I'll give you just a little bit to help you think, okay, if I put quartering of troops as number 4, Mr. Jones is going to yell at me. I better not do that. I've got to remember it's number 3. Okay? So let's talk number 4. See, now you're not going to forget it because it's so crazy. You're going to go, okay, I remember Mr. Jones was rambling on something here about number 3 and 4. And 4 quarters and a dollar, that's not right. So I'm going to put down number 3. Yeah. Like I'm telling you, some might work. So number 4 talks about no illegal search and seizure. There's 4 doors in a car. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I like that. We can go with, there's 4 doors in a car. So basic principle here is that they must have a warrant in order to search your car or your home or your personal belongings. And without a warrant, you can deny access to those things if a police officer asks you. So if you get pulled over and a police officer asks, do you mind if we search the back of your car? First of all, you can deny. You can say, actually, I do mind. Please, I don't want you to unless you have a warrant. And unless he has reasonable cause to go search or to go get a warrant or request one, he's not going to be able to get one. Now, if he suspects that you are harboring an illegal immigrant in that trunk, then perhaps he could go get a warrant and he'd make you just sit there and wait until he gets that warrant through, and then they could do that. But you can deny and you can say, no, please, I don't want you to search my car. In fact, I have had police officers advise students, especially if you are riding with friends or you get into college and you're riding with some people that maybe you think you know well, if you get pulled over and a police officer asks to search your car, to decline due to the fact that you don't know what somebody else may be hiding in your car. And if somebody's got something on them, which hopefully you're not hanging out with that crowd, but if somebody slips it out of their pocket and stuffs it in the back seat of your car, now you're liable. So not to say that any of you would have anything to hide, but you do have the right to deny that unless they have a warrant. Josh?
If you deny it and you're under the age of 18, can't the police call your parents and say yes?
That
Say yes for you.
I don't know the answer to that. It seems logical that that would be the case, but I don't want to confirm or deny because I don't know. So that could be. Yeah. And that's why I say it would make sense, but I can't verify that for sure. So now they have to have a warrant in order to legally search your property. And there have been a lot of cases that have been thrown out because police officers have not followed this. And they have found something, picked it up, documented it without the proper warrant. And so when it gets to court, they have to throw out that convicting piece of evidence because they didn't have a proper warrant to do so. And so if you're interested in going into criminal justice or going into the law enforcement, it's really important you know Amendment number 4 and you follow it. Number 5 is talking about the rights of the accused. So there are a lot of things in Amendment number 5. And so I kind of highlighted, I just say these are the rights of the accused. Oftentimes we may hear on TV somebody talking about my Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent, those type of things. That is part of Amendment number 5, although you will not actually find the Miranda rights in here. That was a 1971 Supreme Court decision that forced police officers to recite that to make sure that people were aware of what their Fifth Amendment rights were all about. And you can actually plead the Fifth, which means that you can remain silent. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to a police officer. You don't have to talk to a lawyer. You can protect yourself against self-incrimination. So here are some of the things that are involved in there. So you have the right to appear before a grand jury, so a trial by your peers to determine your guilt or innocence. You also have the right to double jeopardy. Well, I should say no double jeopardy. And so double jeopardy is the idea that you can be tried for the same crime twice. That is not allowed in our country. So, for instance, if you were convicted of a crime, you go serve your time, and you get out of jail after serving that time, and then further evidence is presented, then they can't come back and prosecute you a second time for that same crime. Even though maybe they could get a few more years because they found out that your crime was far worse than what they originally had thought. So once you've served your time, you're done for that crime. Now, if you're linked to a different crime, then they can bring up different charges. That does not apply to double jeopardy.
So it's not like if you murder somebody, like two people, you don't get charged for it twice, you just get charged for it once, or?
No, if you kill two people, you can get 2 charges of first-degree murder. But once you have served that, they can't come back and let's say that after the fact they find out that that you had actually kept them as a prisoner for 6 months before you killed them, and that evidence hadn't been brought up in the original trial. They can't come back and charge you for kidnapping later. So because it was linked to that same trial, that same crime that was done there. I'm trying to think of another better example there, but there have been lots of people that they've been charged with multiple counts of the same crime. So they kill 2 people, they get 2 counts of first-degree murder, which can lead to a stiff sentence for that. Self-incrimination is where you start just blabbing stuff, and you start talking to the police officer, and he pulls you over for speeding, and you like, man, sorry, I'm going way too fast because I just robbed a bank and I'm trying to get out of the state really quick. Well, you have just self-incriminated, and now they can use that against you in the court of law. So you can plead the fifth and just say, sorry, officer, I was going fast, and that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to answer any more questions. Due process is an important part. It's your due process to have the right to an attorney, have the right to be represented. The fact that police are going to use the proper techniques and authority to go through the processing of you as a detainee as well as the evidence. And then eminent domain. Do you know the government can take your property? Yeah, that's eminent domain. If it is used for public benefit, then they can come up to you and they can force you to sell your property, and now it has to be a fair market value. They can't undercut you and try to give you little to nothing for your property, but if it's fair market value, they can force you to sell. And you could say, well, my family's had this farm since the Mayflower, and we have all this history here, and we've had this farm. They said, sorry, well, we are putting an interstate through here, so you're going to sell it to us. And that has happened, and that has gone to court many, many times. And most of the time, the citizens lose because it is for the benefit of the majority. Now, there was a place where I grew up that somebody actually won their case against the government, and so the road made a massive turn around their property. And so it was pretty cool because somehow they had won that case, and the government had to redraw the freeway, and you could see pretty clearly where they had to turn around or had to make that bend in the road. Amendment number 6 gives you your right to a trial by jury. So there's a lot of crossover here between 5 and 6, and they merge together a little bit. So I like to think about amendment number 5. This is your rights as you're being processed, as you're being accused. So that's why I say it's the rights of the accused. Number 6 is actually your rights once you are in the trial process. Okay, so it's your right to a trial by jury of your peers. It's the right to a speedy and public trial. You can also confront your witnesses. The witnesses against you, you can request to talk to them. We can't have anonymous witnesses just bring up charges against you and not give a reason why. Amendment number 7 is dealing with civil lawsuits. So if you have a disagreement with somebody, and let's say that you want to sue your neighbor over the fact that you believe that that he snuck into your garage and he stole your Snuggie out of your garage, and you're going to take him to court and you're going to sue him for stealing that Snuggie. Or let's say that he came over, or you're going to sue him for destruction of your above ground pool, and you think that he snuck over in the middle of the night and he was diving into it and he broke the side of it and there's water all over your yard, and so you're going to sue him for that. You take him to a civil court and you would sue him for the cost of repairs to that pool or replacement of that Snuggie, whatever it may be. So this is not dealing with crime necessarily. It's more dealing with compensation for damages. So you'll see a lot of car accidents end up in civil suits. Anybody ever watch Judge Judy? Okay. All right. So Judge Judy, she deals with a lot of civil lawsuits, and it amazed me. Somebody at one time came to me and told me how much she is worth. My jaw dropped. I don't remember what the figure was, but I was not expecting that for Judge Judy. She is worth a ton of money. Anyway, let's move on to number 8. So 5, 6, and 7 deal with courts. And so if you kind of group those together, 5, 6, and 7 work together there. Now number 8 is dealing with cruel and unusual punishment as well as excessive bail. So this is talking about once you're arrested. So what I do to remember number 8 is I take the 8 and I turn it sideways. It looks like a pair of handcuffs. Okay, so 8 is the handcuff one. No excessive bail, no cruel and unusual punishment. So you are not allowed as a police officer to waterboard somebody for stealing a pack of gum at Payless. Okay, that's considered cruel and unusual. Waterboarding. I don't know. Are we doing that again? I don't know. I know Obama said we weren't. I don't know what Trump's stance is on that. Yes?
Is there a chance that I would someday make as much money as Judge Judy?
No.
Well, she might retire here.
That is
By-
$900,000 a day.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
And she
47
works
million per year.
52 days.
Yeah. Told you. I told. Yeah. It's just. It's stupid money right there. I mean, that's just. I can't comprehend that.
I mean, I'd take that.
All right. Well, maybe you need to go into that path, and you need to be Judge Josh and take over.
No,
Yeah.
no,
There you
please
go.
don't. Please don't.
Who is
so-
saying don't?
Number 9 are the rights of the people. I don't have a good memory tool for this one, but 9 and 10 are a broad kind of. They chose these to just cover all their bases. So essentially, number 9 says that any rights that we haven't mentioned already are still rights that are granted to the people. And so it ensured the fact that the individual people still maintain their own sovereignty. Yep. What do you got?
Mine rhymes with 9.
Oh, mine and 9. Okay, I like that one. So if you want to use that, then there's a good memory tool. Mine and 9 rhyme together. Now, number 10 are the powers to the states. So any power that was not already given away in the first 9 amendments, the states are allowed to pick up. So there are certain things, again, we are dealing with a confederation becoming a federal government. So the states were very anxious to find out, what are our powers? They're in here. Some of them are specifically listed throughout the amendment. Some of them are a little more broad and just general. But essentially they said anything that we've not already given to the federal government, states, you can have the power over for that. Some of those would include the power to determine driver licensing. And so different states have different rules for that. And even though they are interchangeable and the states work together on that, some states do require different age limits or different requirements to obtain a driver's license. So number 11 are the state lawsuits. So the way that I remember number 11, I think about this one is that lawyers that are suing states are going to be very stiff and very wealthy, so they look they're standing straight up like they're in a suit. So we got two lawyers suing each other, one-on-one. That's number 11. Okay, again, I'm telling you, it may not work for you, but it works for me, and I've been teaching this a long time. So you're welcome to borrow it, change it, modify it however you want to. But that's number 11. You as an individual cannot sue. There are certain laws regarding suing states. And then if states are going to sue one another, there are laws involved in that, which we're not going to go deep into that, but you should know that that's what that one covers. So we had an issue in our first couple of elections regarding our president and vice president electoral college. We very quickly found out that there was a weakness in our system in the fact that we had a president of one political party and a vice president of a different political party. Because the way it was originally written in the Constitution, whoever got the most electoral votes became president, second most became vice president. So if that were the case, we would have President Trump, Vice President Hillary today. That is a reality show waiting to happen. Okay, that nothing would happen in government, but that would be entertaining nonetheless. So Amendment number 12, the way I remember this one is that we are dealing with the number 1 and number 2 guy in our country. So we put those together and we have Amendment number 12. So we are now doing a separate ballot for the president and vice president when it comes to electoral college. So when we talk about the electoral college, when we actually elect the president, they'll go through, they'll do the vote for the president first, determine who that guy is, then they'll come back and re-vote on the vice president. And I'm not going to go through the whole electoral college process today, but they do separate those as a result of Amendment number 12. Our next 3 amendments are all Civil War, or you might call them slave amendments, because they come out of the slavery issue. So Amendment number 13 is the abolition of slavery, and number 13 is often thought of as unlucky, so slavery is a very unfortunate part of our history, and so I remember that number 13 kicks off the slavery amendments. Now, Amendment number 13 is good because we got rid of slavery and we no longer allow that in our country, but that's all it did. It just abolished slavery and said no more slavery is allowed, and so because it didn't go far enough, number 14 was required, which number 14 deals with citizenship. And it defines who an American citizen should be. So included in that were the freed black former slaves, who are no longer slaves due to Amendment number 13, but they were just kind of floating along in society, and nobody knew, are these guys citizens? Are they not citizens? Of course, racism was rampant in our country. They did not want them to become, well, yeah, it's still there, but let's not go down that path right now. But racism was a big deal. They did not want to be part of it, and so the government said, look, here's what we meant by number 13. Here's what we didn't get right. Let's fix it. Let's define who these citizens are. Now, according to this amendment, it says that anybody who is born in the continental United States is automatically an American citizen. Fast forward here to today. What problem does that bring up in our nation? Immigration. How so? Okay, so if a pregnant woman comes into our country illegally, has her baby in this country, is that child an American citizen? Based on the 14th Amendment, which states that anybody born in the borders of this country is an American citizen. Based on that, it seems that way. So a lot of people have argued that way, and a lot of citizenships have been given out because of that. Flip the argument to the other side, and those that say that that child should not be a citizen, they say, well, they have violated our Constitution by coming to our country illegally, so because they're in violation of the Constitution, this becomes void. That's another good argument. That's still being debated in the courts, and that's something that has not been decided, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But the sad reality is that you've got this dilemma then, and it's a pretty big moral dilemma. We have this child that may or may not be an American citizen. We know mom is an illegal immigrant, so by our laws, she should be deported back to her country. What do we do with the child? Are we going to deport one of our own citizens? Or are we going to split up the family? That's tough. And that's the reality of the immigration issue. It's more than just let's build a wall or let's not build a wall. It's family issues like this. And that's why politicians have a really tough job. And yes, they deserve a lot of criticism, but they're also dealing with a lot of these things. So it'll be interesting to see how they interpret Amendment number 14 regarding immigration in the next few years. It'll probably end up in the Supreme Court. It's just my hunch on that. Number 15 is our third of the Civil War or slave amendments. They did not go far enough with citizenship when it came to the freed slaves. So now they had to come back here and they had to define voting rights. Well, who's allowed to vote? And so according to Amendment number 15, who is given the right to vote in this country? Let's be more specific than just slaves. It defines who a eligible voter in our country would be. So based on your knowledge of who could have voted, okay, we have citizens, not 18,
Would be like women,
not women. Mm-mm. Yes, 21-year-old males did not say property owner. Originally they argued for that. But according to the 15th Amendment, they said you need to be 21 and you need to be male. Sorry, ladies. Not yet. What? Yes, citizens. Yes. Yep. 21-year-old male citizens. Ladies are not allowed to vote, which to me is mind-boggling that that was still something of the day. But nonetheless, it was. This one came in 1870. But if you remember back to American history, women were the ones that were promoting freeing the slaves. They were the ones pushing the abolition movement. Do you know why? They just love slaves? Okay, identification with their struggle. Good. What did they hope to get in return for doing this great cause for the country? Their rights to vote, yeah. And when it came down to Congress voting on this, they took out the women's right to vote out of this amendment because they feared it was too controversial. Wouldn't you love to go back to 1870s and fix some stuff? Anyway, ladies, your time will come. Maybe. There it goes. Okay, number 16 is income tax. So I remember this one because of Sweet 16. It's a pretty big milestone. And a lot of times you go get a job when you're 16. And when you get a job, you now have to start paying income tax. It all works together.
No taxation.
Well, you are represented.
Lower the voting.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay. I am not in favor of lowering the voting age, though.
Then don't tax us.
So, how do you know what percentage you actually end up paying after your refund comes through? Yeah. So if you are 16 and 17 years old and you are working a job, you're in the lowest tax bracket. At least my assumption would be you'd be in the lowest tax bracket. So yes, you pay taxes initially. Your tax refund usually returns almost all of it. Now, you are still a benefactor of society, and so what you do pay does offer certain protections. And for me, I'm willing to pay that amount of tax to make sure that if my house catches on fire, that the police and the fire department's going to show up. If I'm in a car accident, I want some rescue there. Although my son was in a car accident this summer and no ambulance came. That was weird. But that's another story for another day. So income tax, number 16. And so that one you can generally remember thinking of the age at which you may or may not have started a job. I don't know why my connection is so choppy today. But anyway, let's talk 17. Direct election of senators. So I remember 17 and senators kind of begin with the same start of the word. 17 and senators. That's about the only thing I can think of for that one. But prior to this amendment, and this one was not until 1913, our senators were chosen by our state legislators. And so you did not get to vote for your senator. That has now changed. Number 18 is prohibition. So prohibition means that we are going to make the sale, the transport, and the manufacture of alcohol illegal. What was left off of that list? Consumption. Yeah, it was okay to drink it. But if you were caught transporting it, making it, or selling it, you could be put in jail. But good luck drinking it without being accused of one of those other things. Interestingly enough, there are all kinds of places in DC and Washington where there were underground tunnels, speakeasies, liquor rings that were often linked to the police. So I was in New York a year and a half ago. They were telling us, we were there by the old City Hall, and our tour guide said, so there's City Hall, police chief, mayor, everybody works there, and underneath the city, they were doing some construction work a few years ago, and they found this secret tunnel that went across the street, and it was linked back to the 1920s in the Prohibition era. And across the street was one of the city's biggest speakeasies. And so many of the police officers would confiscate the alcohol, they'd bring it into City Hall, and all of a sudden it'd disappear. Well, where do you think it was going? So a lot of corruption going on during Prohibition. Who was the leader of the Prohibition movement? What group of people? Who had failed to get their vote back in the abolition movement? Women. So I must not have heard you. So now women are trying again through Prohibition, trying to make some social change. Even though they can't vote, they're trying to do it through other means. So they are. Lost my connection once again. There we go. So number 18 is prohibition. And I remember this one because 18 is another birthday milestone. You turn 18, you are not legally allowed to drink alcohol. So prohibition. Well, we're dealing with prohibition. All right. So nobody could drink alcohol. Okay, and so in number 18, remember prohibition. Now, ladies, you get the right to vote. Number 19. Yep. So, amendment number 19, the women get the right to vote here. There's not a whole lot that I have to connect that one, but I just remember that one comes after prohibition. Number 20 is the lame duck amendment. It's also known as the inauguration amendment or the presidential oath of office amendment. It goes by a number of different names. So it changes the inauguration date from March 4th back to January 20th. So a president who is leaving office is known as a lame duck. Can't do anything. He's not going to get anything through Congress. He's essentially just eating up our tax dollars, enjoying the good life of the White House and the presidential limo. So it used to be 5 months from November up to March, and John Adams was a good example of why this was a bad idea to have so much time. And by this point, we had kind of figured out the presidency, and so we decided that that's just too much time to work on a transition team, and so we're going to shorten up that lame duck period to only 2 months. And we are going to then have that inauguration date on January 20th. So January 20th is a good date for you to know here with the lame duck amendment. That is when we inaugurate a new president every 4 years, or we take the oath of office every 4 years for the presidency. So that is number 20. Then we get number 21, another birthday milestone. You get to be 21, and you are of legal drinking age, not endorsing it nor saying that you should. Let me be very clear about that. But legally, that is the drinking age, and so they repeal prohibition, and now alcohol is released back into the public. Which, by the way, why did they do that?
Because they're losing a lot of money.
Why, Chance?
They're losing a lot of money.
Yeah. FDR needed money to support his New Deal programs. And so best way to get money is to open up the sale of alcohol and tax it. And so it was not just about giving people alcohol back. Now, yeah, people were happy about it, but there was a government reason behind it. Speaking of FDR, he decided he liked the presidency a little bit too much, and he served for 3+ terms. He actually got elected 4 times to the presidency. Why did we never have a president do that before? George Washington, yeah. He decided that after his second term that that's all that any president should have, and so he stepped down. He gave a inspiring speech in his farewell address, and so every other president after that respected George Washington. Now, it's not that FDR didn't respect George Washington. He just felt that he was not done yet. And so he got elected 4 times. After that, Congress said, FDR did a good job, but what if we have a guy that we don't like or don't agree with? So let's put a term on that. So 2 terms. 2s go with the 22. 2-term for the president, 2-2-2 is the best way to remember that one. 2-term limit on the presidency. Now, what is the max number of years a particular president could serve should he take over after previous president dies or gets thrown out of office? You could serve a maximum of 12 years because until you get to that 2-year point, 2 years is more than 2 years considered a full term. So you could technically serve 2 years and still have 2 more terms of eligibility. We've not seen anybody do that yet, but theoretically it is possible. Number 23 gives Washington, D.C. the right to vote. So up until 1961, Washington, D.C. residents did not have a vote in a presidential election. They were not part of a state. D.C. was its own entity in and of itself, and so they did not have the electoral votes. And so therefore, there was no point in them voting for president because our presidents voted through the electoral system. And so we decided here in the 1960s that Washington, D.C. needs electoral votes. They need to be able to vote in the presidential election. So we give them 3 members in the, or 3 electoral votes from Washington, D.C. There's a lot of people pushing for D.C. to have representation in the Senate and the House. That is still up for debate right now as to whether they should be allowed to do that. But number 23 is D.C. I don't have a good memory thing for that one. DC 23. Okay, that works. We'll rhyme it together. DC 23. 24 is no poll tax. So unfortunately, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment did not get rid of all of the exclusions that some states were doing to prevent blacks and others from voting, and so they were creating poll taxes that were not necessarily illegal. If you were a strict viewer of the Constitution, there's nowhere you're going to find something that said no poll tax, but they define that here in number 24. You are not allowed to pay a poll tax, or you're not allowed to charge a poll tax for people to vote. Number 24. Now, number 25 is presidential disability and succession. Now, my memory one on this one probably will not relate to you. I know that President 25 was William McKinley, and he was assassinated, and so then when he died, somebody else came in and took over for him, so I know it's dealing with presidential succession. That one may not work for you if you don't know McKinley is 25. But what this one is telling us is that we have a specific outline for who should be our next president should something happen. We all assume, well, it should be the vice president. Well, that was not anywhere in the Constitution. And so we decided we really need to have that so there's no argument should something horrific happen and we don't have somebody trying to usurp power and authority without the proper means to do so. Now, it also deals with disability. There's actually a clause in here which states that if members of the cabinet and members of Congress deem the president unfit for his job, they can declare him disabled and essentially take the presidency from him. That's not an easy process, and it's not likely to happen. But if he were to somehow have some sort of brain injury, car accident, or something, then they could exercise that power.
Is this before or after Kennedy?
This was 19. No, I do not have. It was after Kennedy. It was after, because I have number 24 was in 64, which Kennedy died in 63, and so I believe it may have been in response to Kennedy, and it started people thinking about that. But I don't have the exact year for that in my notes. So number 26, 18-year-olds are allowed to vote. So if we take the 2 and the 6, it makes 18-year-olds are allowed to vote. So that's the best way I remember that one. But this was a response to Vietnam, as many of the soldiers who were fighting and dying over there that had been drafted against their will said, hey, we can't even vote for the people making these decisions, and yet you are forcing us to go to war. So kind of follow a little bit of Mac's logic there with the income tax, except for the fact that these people were giving their lives to the country without the right to vote. So we changed the voting age from 21 to 18 in Amendment number 26. And then our last one here is congressional pay raises. And this is one we've already talked about to some extent, that sat on the books for a long, long time, almost 200 years. I guess it was 200 years that sat on the books. And Congress is not allowed to raise their own salary while they are still in their current term. So if Congress wants to pay themselves more, they've got to wait until their term expires, they get elected again, and then their new pay raise can go into effect. So it just helps to avoid corruption. It's probably a good idea. But we'll talk a little bit more about congressional pay and congressional responsibilities later.